Welcome to the Working Genius podcast, where we discuss anything and everything related to the 6 types of working genius and how it impacts your work and your life. I'm Pat Lencioni, your host, joined by Tracy and Bo today. Cody is traveling. I've got Karen sitting next to me, Matthew producing in studio. Bo, what is the topic today?
DGs are overrated. No, just kidding. Working genius atrophy.
That was his teasing of Cody, our DG. I love how you tease him. Yeah, working genius atrophy is what we're going to talk about today. And here's where this comes from. I was thinking today, we talk about working genius in terms of like, we want to use it at work because that's what we're good at and that's what our team needs from us. But really, we need to utilize our working geniuses because they're gifts that we have. And if we're not doing them in some way in our life, they will atrophy and we will atrophy. We are meant to, it's like God gives us different kind of muscles and we're supposed to use the ones he gave us. And when we don't do that, bad things happen. It's not natural. We are meant to use these things. And I'll give an example of this. When I wrote my first book, I thought, well, that might be the last book I write. I remember, Tracy, you remember this. Mm-hmm. And they were like, oh yeah, there's another one. And then other things have come up. And I do love to write. Now, I could never write a book that I didn't feel passionate about, but new topics have come up and I thought, yeah, I'm to do that. Well, recently I was writing a book and then we were so busy here at work and it was the right thing to do to put it on hold. So it's been about 8 months since I've really spent a lot of time writing and it feels funky. And I realized, I'm not using, that's how I use my invention and discernment. And when I put that on hold, some weird things started to happen. I didn't really have an outlet for the actions that I normally do, which give me joy and energy. And so it's not just about finding out how to do it in your job. It's about, we need to be exercising these things in order to stay healthy. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It does make sense. And we've talked about before that the first insight might be to discover your working genius and tell the people around you because they might at work have a need for and a use for your genius. And that would be a natural outlet to be able to use your genius at work among your team. And it sounds like, Pat, part of what you're talking about is even outside of work, to be able to look for and have opportunities to keep using your genius. It's interesting that even the right metaphor of like atrophying muscles, it's not that you're necessarily looking to grow them. You're looking to make sure that they don't decline, right? You're saying, I want to be able to keep using it. And actually, there's something ironic almost of what you described of not using your genius actually led to you having less joy and energy.
Right. And sometimes we can't use it at work in a certain context. And I realized it was the right thing for us not to be doing that, but I should have been continuing to do things on my own because I kind of needed to for my own sanity and health. And I had never really thought of it that way before. And it made me think too, Bo, about hobbies. It's like when people say, well, what are your hobbies? Or when people are retiring, like, what are you going to do next? And I always have a hard time with this because the standard hobbies that most people do aren't the things I like to do. As an ID, my hobbies would be, I would utilize invention and discernment around something. And that's not usually golfing for me or fishing. And I've always thought, why don't I like doing those things? Well, it kind of makes sense given my working geniuses. I think about my dad and Tracy, you were saying your husband, Greg, they love mowing the lawn. I mean, it is not something they just have to do. It's something they love to do. And after they're done, they stand out there and they would look at it. My dad would do that. And there was a sense of accomplishment because they have tenacity. And it's like, it needs to be done. I want to finish it. Look, it's all done the way I thought it should go. I got it done. And that gave them joy and energy. Mm-hmm. And so we all have to ask ourselves, what is it that I need in order to be fulfilled in my actions in life? And that's going back to your working genius and asking yourself if you're exercising those muscles.
Bo, I want to go back to something you said. Obviously, it's important that we use them and our muscles don't atrophy, our geniuses don't atrophy. But I do believe that there's potential for growth within our geniuses. I do believe that if we use our geniuses more, there's more of there's an opportunity to refine them and to get better at them. What do you guys think about that?
I totally agree with you. In fact, it might be when you hear that that you think, oh, that would be selfish for me to just be able to do more of what gives me joy and energy. But actually, your geniuses are the way that you're going to help the world. Your God-given geniuses are the way that you're going to be able to serve other people. So continuing to grow those muscles, increase your ability to be able to do more, increases your ability to be able to do more good for other people. So don't just sit on your gift. Don't just sit on your genius. But when you, in your hobbies and your relationships and the way you volunteer and your weekends are leaning into your genius, not only will you benefit, but the people around you will benefit as that gift gets refined.
You know, that's so interesting. I just thought about something. I don't know what his name was. I don't think it was a Bibi Bikila. It was a famous Kenyan runner from the Olympics, like that ran the marathon or something. One of the great runners of all time. And when he retired from running, somebody asked him the question, hey, are you going to just do a lot more running for pleasure now and go out and run? And he says, no, I'm not going to ever run again. I'm going to go get fat. And they said, why? And he goes, because I hate running. I did it so I could make money. We were very poor. I don't want to run anymore. It was very painful, which is different than somebody who says, oh yeah, I just run because of the runner's high. And like, I'm going to keep running, but I'm going to do it because I enjoy it. Right. And sometimes we do things in our lives that isn't really our genius, but we do it because that's what the career we got into or whatever else. But we are meant to do the things we love to do. And if I'm a professional golfer, some of them will not want to golf after they're done because it's kind of a grind. And others are going to say like, I just love going out there. Every time I hit the ball, it's fun. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, what do we do because it gives us joy and energy? And how do we incorporate that not only into our work, but how do I incorporate it into my personal time as well? And this has been like literally today, a massive breakthrough for me because I have been stumped as to what I would ever do when I retired. And I tell you what it's going to be. It's going to involve sitting around with a bunch of people with similar interests and talking about things and coming up with ideas and evaluating things. That's what I do for fun. And I'm going to stop feeling bad about the fact that I'm not, it's probably not going to be 18 holes of golf a day.
I actually met a guy this weekend. Turns out that he was in the banking industry and he had, I'll put retirement in quotes, a few years ago. And I said, oh, tell me what you're up to now. And he said, I watched so many people in my industry have, and he said this, a crash landing. He said, physicians can hang on to patients for a little while. Lawyers can keep some client work going. But he said, in my industry, it's like you're all or nothing. And he said, I watched too many people who were trying to land the plane, have a crash landing, and I didn't want that. So he said, so I made an agreement when I retired that I would stay on a day a week to be able to be an advisor and a helper. And I thought that when I heard that, I was like, that is so wise, because even though he's finished with his career, he is going to continue to use his gift, the skill that he's developed, and it's going to help people. And he's actually going to experience way more life by giving back and still using his gift. And hopefully now he has to do a little less of what he didn't like to do, right? He can kind of piecemeal the parts of his job that he really wanted to do. But Pat, my guess is he is a discerner who loves coming to work a day a week and getting to give advice.
Right. And if you know what that is, do not ever feel bad about trying to exercise that in lots of different places in your life. And I think that maybe we should all retire as early as we can. What I mean by that is do what we love as soon as we can so that we never really feel the need to retire. And Karen just wrote me a note that said, don't wait till you retire, Pat. But I love a lot of the things I do every day at work. I need to start figuring out how to do those on the weekends, in other ways, in other settings, and realize that's actually good for me. And then when I play golf once a week when I retire, maybe for 9 holes with my good friends, I'll probably be standing around brainstorming with them about ideas rather than worrying about getting my handicap down from a 28 to a 25.
Pat, do you think that this is harder for certain geniuses to be able to find environments outside of work to be able to use their genius and lean in?
Probably because some of them involve other people and other kind of pursuits that aren't that common. I mean, like we talked about pickleball before, like there's pickleball leagues and there's pickleball courts and there's lights on the pickleball courts and you can sign up and that's that's what people do. But there's not like, hey, you need a club where you go to the movies or you you read the newspaper together and you talk about what's going on and how you're going to influence the local. You know what I mean? It's like if your geniuses lend themselves to kind of not very structured activities, it's harder to find a club for that. I think.
Yeah, that's interesting as you say that. I think galvanizing might actually be something that's difficult to do in isolation. You might have to be intentional and actually show up for a while to an environment before they hand you the microphone or say, hey, can you help rally people around this thing?
That's a very good,
It may take some time.
Absolutely. Depends on what that is. Yeah, you're exactly right. Some might lend themselves, and this might get to Myers-Briggs too. If you're an introvert, maybe there's going to be a lot more things you can do. You can go read a book and sit, roll up in the corner and read. And for me as an extrovert, it's a lot about bouncing ideas off other people. And as a guy, I haven't done that. You know, guys are not as good at friendship as gals are. And so having to find a group of people that I can do that with on a regular basis outside of work might be something I need to start doing in addition to what I do at work.
But you know what's interesting? I almost feel like you can reframe any activity, any hobby within the context of your working genius. If you're aware of your working genius and others around you who are participating with you are aware, I
Tell me about that, Tracy.
I just feel like the golfing example that you used, I feel like you could golf 18 holes. It just depends on who you're with and the conversations you're having. And the fact that the focus is not going to be on your handicap, it's going to be on the relationships.
Yes, you're right.
So, yeah.
You're right. Then you need to find other people that share your, because otherwise if I go out there with some guy who really is trying to just get better at putting, he's like, would you shut up?
Exactly. You need to start an ID golf club, you know, that you're just golfing with a bunch of IDs, you know?
And golf is a fun example because it's such a great sport. But also, Pat, I've golfed with you and it's great conversation and great company. And you're actually really good at teaching people how to golf. So you would not go out there trying to tenacity people to, you know, get their index down by half a stroke. You would be teaching people new insights. And here's what's the most important thing to think about and helping them begin to love the sport and having good conversations in the golf cart along the way.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, I'd probably be like, hey, I can golf with them and we could talk about things going on in the world. We could talk about their faith. I can tell them about how they can learn to enjoy golf and get the ball up in the air. But if it became about competing and getting and grinding on that, then I would probably, you're right, I would lose my my interest in that. So you're right, Tracy. We probably can reframe a lot of different things we do based on our working genius. But the main point here is that we have a duty to ourselves to use the gifts we've been given, because that's one of the purposes of our life, is to use the gifts we've been given. And it's easy for us to talk ourselves out of that, either because we get into a place in life because we're a parent or in our work, and we think, well, it's about providing. But if we're not using those skills and those talents, we are going to shrivel up a little bit and atrophy. And that is never a good thing. Bo, so tell me, you're an IG, Bo. Let's do an example here. What would be something, if you weren't IN and Gene at work, how do you IG outside of work?
The first place that comes to mind is at my home. And without awareness of working genius, my invention and galvanizing can both be very irritating to my wife. But when we know that there's a time for inventing and a time for galvanizing, they can definitely be used. But what I found is, I said this a minute ago, that galvanizing is rarely invited right off the bat. But when I've chosen to show up to the organizations we serve with, I've talked about the retreats we participate in before in our local church, it doesn't take too long for them to find use for a galvanizer. And it's so life-giving to me. So I will host on Sunday mornings at church. I help rally the volunteers for this retreat that we're doing. I help galvanize my family around the 4th of July. And it's so wonderful when it's invited. We've talked about that before for any of our geniuses when they are invited. And a little difficult to advocate for yourself when they're not. So I think that's a possible tension people would feel. I bet that you both would feel that as discerners, that if you were to be involved, whether, you know, relationally or volunteering or involved in your kids' schools, that if your discernment is not trusted or solicited, it's very hard to advocate for it for yourself.
Yeah. I'm wondering about you, Tracy, being a double responsive, D and E. I'm wondering, so what do you think outside of work, what's the best way for you to exercise your D and E?
Well, it's interesting. I think as I move into this next phase in my life, I'm an empty nester and my kids are out in the world. I've got one in the working world. I've got one that's still in college. And I actually feel like I use a lot of my discernment and enablement with them now, parenting them at this age that they're at. And they come to me, they seek advice. Of course, they hear mom talking about Working Genius all the time. They know I'm a D. So they're coming to me more often. And I love that. Now, when they were young, they did not want that at all. But now, as I move into this next phase of life as a mother and as a wife, I think I'm leaning into that more. And that's fun.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's
as far as
wonderful.
hobbies, I'm not sure. I'll have to think about that.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, the point here we want to make to everybody is this. Audit yourself and say, how much am I using the muscles that I'm trying to develop here in my Working Genius? And don't substitute using the muscles that you're not supposed to be developing in order to do that, because that'll make your body look funky. When you're not using the muscles you're meant to use and you're developing the other ones, you're going to look like one of those bodybuilders who's all mutated and everything.
And I would just add that if you're in a role right now where you're not getting to use your genius, choosing to keep using it outside of work is believing that someday there's going to be a job that needs it. And I believe that there is a role out there, that your geniuses are needed. It may not be in your current organization or team or industry, but they are needed. And continuing to invest in you will allow you later to be able to serve more people and have a bigger impact.
Absolutely. All righty. Let's work out those muscles that we need to work out. All right. Well, thanks for listening to us, everybody. We appreciate you being here. We love talking about Working Genius. It's growing so fast, and it is one of the most exciting things we've ever worked on, hearing stories from people who are discovering what they're meant to be and what they're meant to do. And so never hesitate to share those stories with us. And join us next time when we talk more about Working Genius on the podcast. God bless.